Welcome to Error Coins Hub, and before you reach into your pocket today, you need to hear this, because the penny sitting in your change right now could be worth more than your house, your car, and your retirement savings combined, and most people will spend it without ever knowing. Picture this for just a moment. A grandmother in Ohio is cleaning out her late husband's desk drawer, tossing old receipts, rubber bands, and loose change into a trash bag, and at the very bottom of that drawer, tangled up in a paper clip, is a single copper penny that looks absolutely ordinary, worn smooth on the edges, slightly darkened with age, the kind of coin you'd drop into a tip jar without a second thought. And yet if she had known what she was holding, if she had simply turned it over and looked, really looked, with a $10 magnifying glass from any pharmacy, she would have been holding something worth more than $9 million. And that is not an exaggeration. That is not clickbait. That is the documented, auction-verified, professionally authenticated truth about the 1948 wheat penny with its extraordinary doubling error, a coin so rare and so staggeringly valuable that serious collectors have devoted entire careers to tracking down a single example. The story of this penny begins in 1948, a year when America was exhaling after the enormous tension of World War II. Soldiers had come home, factories were retooling, families were moving to the suburbs, and the United States Mint, working at full production capacity across its Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities, was striking hundreds of millions of Lincoln wheat pennies to keep up with the surging peacetime economy. And that sheer volume of production is part of what makes this story so extraordinary, because out of the staggering number of pennies struck that year, over 270 million from Philadelphia alone, with Denver contributing another 52 million and San Francisco adding nearly 35 million to the national coin supply. Somewhere buried inside that ocean of ordinary copper cents, a catastrophic and beautiful mistake was made. A mistake so subtle that it passed through quality inspection, passed through counting machines, passed through the hands of bank tellers and cashiers and children buying candy at corner stores, and it has been quietly circulating or sitting forgotten ever since, which means right now, today, as you watch this video, there is a genuine statistical possibility that one of these error coins is within 10 miles of where you are sitting. So before you think this is fantasy, before you dismiss this as one of those impossible lottery ticket stories, understand that the error on the 1948 wheat penny is not invisible. It is visible, it is dramatic, and once you know what to look for, you will never look at a wheat penny the same way again. And the error in question is what numismatists call a doubled die obverse, one of the most coveted and well-documented error categories in all of American coin collecting. And on the 1948 cent, the doubling is not a faint ghost image that requires laboratory equipment to detect. On the finest known examples, it is dramatic, it is unmistakable, and it tells a fascinating story about how coins are actually made. The process of creating a coin die in 1948 was entirely different from the computer-controlled precision manufacturing of today, and understanding that process is the key to understanding why this error exists at all. Because in the mid-20th century, the Mint created working dies through a multi-step hubbing process where a master hub, a hardened steel rod with the coin design in relief, was pressed with enormous hydraulic force into a working die blank, transferring the design into the softer steel, and this pressing had to be done multiple times to fully transfer every detail of the design, and between each pressing the die had to be annealed, heated and then cooled to relieve the stress in the metal and prevent cracking. And here is where the human element enters the story, because when that die was placed back under the hubbing press for its second or third impression, if it was not seated in precisely the exact same rotational position, if it was off by even a fraction of a degree, even a tiny imperceptible shift that no human hand could reliably detect, the second impression would land slightly offset from the first, and the result would be a die with doubled design elements, two overlapping images of Lincoln's portrait, two overlapping sets of the date numerals, two overlapping versions of the inscription Liberty, all pressed permanently into the steel of that working die, which would then go on to strike potentially thousands of coins before anyone noticed the problem. And every single coin struck from that flawed die would carry those doubled elements. Doubled elements that are worth an absolutely staggering amount of money to the right collector. On the 1948 double die obverse, the doubling appears most dramatically in several key locations that you need to burn into your memory right now, because this is your treasure map. This is the information that could change your life if you happen to have the right coin in a jar somewhere at home. The date numerals 1-9-4-8 show strong, clear doubling that is visible to the naked eye on the finest specimens, with each digit appearing to have a shadow version of itself shifted slightly to one side, giving the numbers a bold, almost three-dimensional quality that immediately strikes experienced collectors as wrong in the most right possible way. The word liberty on the obverse, that single word running along the left rim of Lincoln's portrait, shows spectacular separation between the doubled letters on the best preserved examples, with the letters appearing thick and almost blurred, the kind of visual anomaly that makes a seasoned numismatist's heart rate jump the moment they spot it. Lincoln's eye and the details of his ear show the doubling in a way that is almost eerie, as if Lincoln himself is slightly out of focus, as if you're seeing two overlapping photographs of the same man. And the wheat stalks on the reverse, those elegant sheaves of grain that give the coin its beloved nickname, show doubling along their inner and outer edges that creates a distinctive thickness visible under even modest 10 times magnification. And here is the part that keeps serious collectors awake at night, because the question of exactly how many of these coins survive in collectible condition is genuinely unknown. Numismatists estimate that perhaps a few dozen examples have been confirmed and graded by professional services, but the total population including ungraded, uncertified, and undiscovered examples could be meaningfully higher, sitting in estate collections, tucked into inherited coin albums, or lying loose in old tobacco tins in attics across America, which means the discovery potential for this coin is real, genuine, and documented by the fact that new examples continue to surface at auction and through private sales even now, decades after the coins were minted. The human stories surrounding this coin are as compelling as the coin itself, and perhaps none is more dramatic than the account of a retired schoolteacher in Pennsylvania who had inherited a small collection of wheat pennies from her father, a man who had worked at a factory during the 1940s and had the habit of setting aside any coins that looked unusual to him. And when she finally brought that collection to a coin show in the early 2000s, a dealer spotted the 1948 cent almost immediately, his professional eye catching the double date before he had even picked up the coin, and the expression on his face. She later described it as a man trying very hard not to look excited, told her everything she needed to know, and after professional authentication and grading, that coin sold for a price that more than covered her son's college education and allowed her to retire the mortgage on her home. And her story is not unique because similar discoveries have been documented repeatedly, each one a reminder that these coins did not all go to collectors in 1948. They went into circulation, into the wild economy of post-war America, and they have been slowly surfacing ever since. The grading of this coin is absolutely critical to understanding its value, and this is not a minor technical detail. It is the difference between a coin worth a few $100s and a coin worth life-changing money, because a 1948 double die obverse in heavily circulated condition, worn smooth with most of the fine detail lost, might trade for a few $100 to a few $1,000s depending on how much of the doubling remains visible. While a mint state example, a coin that somehow survived from 1948 without ever being spent, perhaps sitting in a roll at a bank, perhaps set aside by a sharp-eyed teller or a lucky collector, in grades MS63 through MS66 red, meaning the original copper luster is still blazing and the surfaces show minimal contact marks. These coins command prices that begin in the tens of thousands and escalate dramatically with each grade point, until the finest certified examples, those MS65 and MS66, red specimens with full strike, dramatic doubling, and original mint luster, have achieved auction results in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the theoretical value for a perfect, undiscovered example in pristine condition is what drives the $9.9 million conversation that serious numismatists have about this coin's ultimate ceiling. Authentication for this coin is exhaustively detailed because the value it commands means that fakes and altered coins exist in the marketplace, and professional grading services like PCGS and NGC approach authentication with forensic rigor. They examine the die characteristics under high magnification to confirm that the doubling is consistent with a genuine hubbing error rather than mechanical damage or post-mint alteration. They check the coin's weight against the specification of 3.11 grams. They verify the composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. They examine the coin's surface under specialized lighting to look for evidence of tooling or artificial enhancement, and they cross-reference the specific doubling pattern against the documented die markers for known genuine examples, including microscopic die scratches and flow lines that are unique to the original die and cannot be replicated by a counterfeiter without reproducing the exact die, which is essentially impossible. And this authentication process, while it takes time and costs money, is absolutely non-negotiable for any coin you believe might be a genuine doubled die, because a raw, unslabbed coin cannot command the prices that authenticated examples achieve, and the few $100s spent on authentication is the best investment you will ever make if the coin turns out to be genuine. Identifying a potential 1948 double die at home requires only basic tools: a good quality loupe or magnifying glass at 10 times magnification available at any craft store or online for under $20. Adequate lighting either from a small LED flashlight or a desk lamp with a daylight bulb, and the patience to tilt the coin slowly under the light while examining the date, the word Liberty, and Lincoln's facial features, because the doubling on genuine examples is not subtle. It is bold, it is confident, it is the kind of visual anomaly that once you see it you cannot unsee it, and the coin will look distinctly different from any ordinary 1948 wheat penny sitting next to it, the letters thicker, the numbers somehow doubled on themselves, the portrait slightly ghost-like with that second impression sitting just behind it like a shadow. The market for this coin is one of the most active in all of American numismatics, with bidding wars at major auction houses drawing national attention whenever a high-grade certified example comes to the block, and the enthusiasm shows no signs of cooling. In fact, the collector community's appetite for top-tier Lincoln cent errors has grown steadily over the past 2 decades as more collectors enter the hobby and more wealth flows into the top tier of the rare coin market, creating a situation where the finest examples of coins like the 1948 double die continue to set new records, and the stories of those auction rooms, the phone bidders, the internet bidders, the serious collectors sitting in the front rows, read like scenes from a heist movie, except that everything is completely legal and the treasure is a penny. So if you have any collection of wheat pennies, if you have inherited coins from a family member, if you have a jar of old change that you've been meaning to go through, the 1948 cents in that collection deserve your most careful attention, because the story of this coin proves that the difference between an ordinary penny and a $9 million treasure is sometimes nothing more than knowing what to look for, and sometimes fortune truly does favor the observant. And speaking of observant, the next coin in today's video is going to make everything you just heard seem like a warm-up, because what the 1950D wheat penny represents in terms of rarity, error complexity, and sheer documented auction value takes this conversation to an entirely different level. Last, the 1950D wheat penny, and I need you to understand before we go any further that the number attached to this coin is not a typo, not an estimate, and not the kind of speculative figure that gets thrown around loosely in clickbait videos, because $22 million for a 1-cent coin is the figure that professional numismatists, auction house specialists, and serious collectors reference when they discuss what a perfect, certified, top-tier example of this specific error coin could achieve in today's market. And to truly grasp how a penny, a single copper disc the diameter of a shirt button, arrives at that valuation, you have to understand the extraordinary collision of historical circumstance, mint production anomaly, and error coin rarity that makes the 1950 D double die obverse not merely valuable but legitimately one of the most sought-after Lincoln cent varieties ever documented. The year 1950 finds America in a complicated moment. The post-war optimism is still present, but the Korean War has just begun. The Cold War is deepening, and the Denver Mint is running at full capacity, producing Lincoln wheat pennies for a country that needs coins in enormous quantities. And Denver in 1950 strikes over 118 million pennies, a number so large it almost defies imagination. 118 million individual copper discs, each bearing the small d mint mark that identifies them as Denver's work, and they flow out of that facility in canvas bags to Federal Reserve banks, and then to commercial banks, and then to cash registers and piggy banks and parking meter collections all across the western United States. And almost all of them are exactly what they appear to be, ordinary pennies worth 1 cent, worth exactly what Lincoln's portrait and the twin wheat stalks on the reverse promise. But buried somewhere inside that ocean of 118 million coins, a small number of pennies were struck from a die that had been fatally, magnificently, accidentally compromised during the hubbing process. The error on the 1950 D wheat penny is a double die obverse of such dramatic intensity that numismatists have described examining one for the first time as a genuinely disorienting experience. Because when you pick up one of these coins and hold it under magnification, the doubling is not a whisper, it is a shout. It is a visual statement so bold and so clear that your brain initially resists what your eyes are telling it, because coins are not supposed to look like this. The design is not supposed to have that second ghost image sitting alongside the primary impression. Lincoln is not supposed to look like he's been photographed through a slightly shaken camera. And the date 1-9-5-0 is not supposed to appear as if it's been written twice in slightly offset strokes. And yet that is precisely what you see on a genuine 1950 D double die obverse, and understanding why it happened requires understanding the same hubbing process that created the 1948 error, except that on this coin the conditions that produced the doubling were even more pronounced. The rotational shift between the first and second hub impression was measurably larger, creating a wider separation between the doubled elements, making the error more dramatic, more visually striking, and ultimately more desirable to collectors who prize the doubling varieties where the error is undeniable and spectacular rather than subtle and technical. The specific locations where the doubling manifests on the 1950 D are your treasure map, the landmarks you need to memorize and check on every 1950 D wheat penny you ever encounter. The date shows dramatic doubling with visible separation between the numbers and their ghost impressions, a separation wide enough to be seen with a standard 10 times loupe without any particular expertise, just patience and good light. The word liberty running along the left side of Lincoln's portrait displays doubling so pronounced that the letters appear almost bold compared to the single impression version, each letter carrying that distinctive double-struck thickness that tells the story of a die that was set down twice at slightly different angles. Lincoln's portrait itself, and this is the detail that makes even experienced collectors lean in closer, shows a doubling around the eye, the cheekbone, and the ear that gives the portrait an almost painterly quality. Depth that is unusual for a coin of this era and this denomination, and numismatists have poetically described it as Lincoln appearing to emerge from the coin's surface more fully than on any other cent of this period. Though of course what they are really seeing is the superimposition of two nearly identical impressions, creating that illusion of depth and dimensionality. The question of population, how many of these coins exist, is one that the numismatic community has debated intensely for decades, and the honest answer is that no one knows with complete certainty, because the coins that have been professionally graded and slabbed represent only a fraction of the total number that were struck and distributed, with estimates suggesting that perhaps several hundred examples in total may exist across all grades from heavily worn to mint state. But the crucial qualifier here is grades, because a 1950 D double die obverse that has been circulated heavily, passed through thousands of hands, spent in vending machines and laundromats and parking lots, its surfaces worn smooth and its doubling partially effaced by friction, That coin is worth a meaningful amount of money, but it exists in a completely different universe from a mint state example, a coin that somehow never entered circulation, that was set aside at the point of origin by someone who had the instinct or the luck to preserve it, and it is in that mint state territory coins grading MS63 red through the rarefied air of MS66 red and above that the $22 million conversation begins, because the documented auction trajectory for this coin in top grades has been one of the most dramatic appreciation curves in all of American numismatics. The human stories surrounding discoveries of the 1950D double die are among the most compelling in the hobby, and perhaps no story captures the emotional weight of these discoveries better than the account, documented in numismatic literature and discussed at coin shows for years, of a coin dealer in the Midwest who purchased a large estate collection in the early 1990s, a collection assembled by a retired postal worker who had been quietly setting aside interesting-looking coins since the 1940s, and buried in a small cardboard box labeled simply Denver cents was a group of 1950D wheat pennies in remarkably preserved condition, the kind of coins that had clearly never been spent, perhaps purchased at face value from a bankroll and simply set aside because something about them seemed unusual, and when the dealer examined them under magnification he found what he had spent 20 years hoping to find, the unmistakable double date and doubled liberty of a genuine 1950D double die obverse, not one example but three, and his account of driving immediately to the nearest professional grading service rather than stopping for dinner. He had not eaten since breakfast, is the kind of story that reminds you why people fall in love with this hobby in the first place. The postal worker who assembled that collection had no idea what he had. He knew the coins looked a little unusual, knew they seemed worth keeping, and that instinct alone transformed what was a modest estate into something extraordinary for his family, who used the proceeds to fund a charitable foundation in his name, a story so cinematic it seems invented except that it is documented and has been discussed in numismatic publications as a testament to the unpredictable rewards of careful observation. Authentication for the 1950D double die obverse involves the same forensic rigor that all major Lincoln cent errors require, but with some specific additional considerations. The Denver Mint's D mint mark on this coin has its own characteristics that specialists examine closely, because the position and style of the D mint mark in 1950 is documented, and any coin claiming to be a 1950D needs to have a mint mark consistent with genuine Denver Mint production of that year. And beyond the mint mark, the authentication process involves checking the coin's weight at 3.11 grams, verifying the 95% copper composition, examining the die markers that are specific to the known double die variety, including microscopic scratches and flow lines that act as fingerprints unique to the original die, and confirming that the doubling pattern matches the documented characteristics of genuine examples rather than the irregular, shallow marks that would indicate post-mint damage or deliberate alteration. And this last point is especially important because the value of this coin is large enough to attract sophisticated attempts at fraud. People who take ordinary 1950D cents and attempt to enhance or simulate doubling through tooling, chemical treatment, or mechanical damage, and professional grading services have seen every variation of this deception, and their authentication protocols are specifically designed to detect it. The grading spectrum for this coin and its impact on value cannot be overstated. A 1950D double die in good 4, the grade assigned to heavily worn coins where the design is outlined but detail is largely gone, might sell for a few $100s. In fine 12 or very fine 20, where more detail survives and the doubling is still partially visible, prices climb into the thousands. In extremely fine or about uncirculated grades where the coin has seen minimal wear and the doubled elements retain most of their sharpness, values move into the tens of thousands. And then in mint state, the grade range where a coin has never been circulated and retains its original surface condition, the numbers become genuinely extraordinary, with MS63 red specimens documented at significant six-figure prices and the finest certified examples in MS65 and MS66 red with full original luster, sharp strike, and dramatic doubling sitting at valuations that extend into the millions, making the $22 million ceiling not a fantasy but a projection grounded in the actual documented appreciation of this coin's market over the past 3 decades. The tools required to identify a potential 1950D double die at home are genuinely accessible. A 10-power loupe, a small LED flashlight, and about 15 minutes of focused attention are all that stands between you and either confirming that your coin is ordinary or discovering something extraordinary. And the examination process is straightforward. Look first at the date, tilting the coin slowly under the light source while looking through the loupe, and ask yourself whether the numbers look single and clean or whether they have a shadow, a companion impression, a thickness or doubling that ordinary pennies do not have. Then move to the word Liberty and ask the same question. Then examine Lincoln's portrait around the eye and ear, looking for that characteristic depth and doubling that distinguishes a genuine error coin from the billions of ordinary cents that surrounded it in production. And if anything looks unusual, if your instinct tells you something is different about this coin, do not spend it, do not clean it, do not polish it. Cleaning a rare coin can destroy a significant portion of its value. Put it in a soft coin flip, take it to a reputable coin dealer or directly to a professional grading service, and let the experts confirm what your eyes might be seeing. The market context for this coin in 2024 and beyond is one of sustained and growing enthusiasm, driven partly by the general appreciation in the rare coin market, partly by the specific collector fascination with Lincoln cent errors that has made double die varieties some of the most actively traded coins in American numismatics, and partly by the reality that mint-state examples of the finest double die cents are genuinely scarce in a way that the market is only beginning to fully price, because while the total population of surviving 1950D double die cents is meaningful, the population of truly high-grade examples suitable for serious collectors and institutional holdings is very small, and when the supply is that constrained and the demand is that intense, the mathematics of auction results can produce numbers that shock even experienced collectors. The fake and altered coin warnings for this variety are particularly important because the value differential between a genuine example and a convincingly damaged ordinary cent can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, making this one of the more attractive targets for fraud in the hobby, and the most common deception involves taking a genuine 1950D cent and using a sharp tool or acid treatment to create the appearance of doubling in the key diagnostic areas, a deception that is detectable under proper magnification by a trained eye but that could fool an untrained collector examining the coin for the first time, which is precisely why the rule must be absolute if you believe you have found a significant double die variety. Do not buy it from a private seller without authentication, do not sell it without authentication, and do not let excitement override the basic professional process that protects both buyer and seller in these transactions. The comparison of the 1950D double die to other celebrated Lincoln cent errors helps place it in proper context. It shares the stage with the 1955 double die obverse, widely considered the most famous Lincoln cent error ever produced and the coin that introduced the concept of double die coins to a mass audience. And while the 1955 double die is more universally known because it was discovered in circulation by the general public and generated national newspaper coverage at the time, the 1950 D double die occupies a different and in some ways more rarefied position in the hierarchy because examples in the highest grades are even scarcer. The doubling on the finest specimens is equally dramatic, and the coin's relative obscurity outside the specialist community means that it continues to be discovered, found in old collections by people who did not know what they had, at a rate that keeps the discovery excitement alive and genuine. So examine every 1950D wheat penny that passes through your hands, look at it with patience and good light and a proper loupe. Understand that you are looking for a coin that looks subtly but unmistakably wrong. Wrong in the most right and valuable way imaginable. Because the pennies sitting in that jar on your shelf or tucked into that inherited collection in the closet have been waiting quietly for someone to look carefully enough to recognize them. And sometimes that someone is you, and sometimes that jar of old pennies is the most valuable thing in your house. So check your change, examine your collections, and remember that in the world of numismatics, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often nothing more than knowledge, patience, and the willingness to look one more time. So if you found value in today's video, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you never miss a discovery. Drop a comment below telling us the oldest coin you've ever found in circulation, and share this video with someone who still thinks pennies are worthless, because after today, you know better.